For some time there have been attractive ideas of getting away from it all or going against the grain of what society is doing. Because we have felt for some time that whatever society is doing is on some level a bit insincere, vapid, perhaps not that meaningful, and it creates a certain kind of counter movement, a desire to rebel, a desire to express our discontent and assert our authenticity in the face of all of that. This channel is Meditation Amsterdam. My name is Pablo, and today I want to talk about the fake freedom of the rebel or rebellious thinking. And this comes from videos that I've made in the past about how the egoic mind or the thinking mind has a great ability to create convincing counterfeits of authenticity. It can create very accurate facsimiles of notions that we value in our heart, such as love, freedom, sincerity, authenticity. And one of them is, to me, this idea of the rebel, the person that criticizes societal mores, that displays a kind of bravado or tries to live a life that makes a point of not being same as everyone else. And we see that in all kinds of different guises, but what's interesting about it is a notion that I've heard from thinkers in the past, which is that whether you are on the side of societal mores and traditions and tenets of how to live, or whether you are against them, you are still on two sides of the same coin which revolve around whatever society proposes to be real on some level, right? So when we become a rebel, we start to go against the grain, but we are still on some level validating that grain. We are validating its existence, and we are simply taking sort of the counter posture. And there's something to be said about dialectical thinking and the ability to take both the for and against of any societal rule or idea, and seeing if by looking at both sides of the coin, we can synthesize them into something altogether different. If we don't do that, we are simply defining ourselves, but by that against which we position ourselves. We are still trapped. We are trapped in being the counter argument, you could say. And what's interesting about this, if we take that not just from a societal conversation, logical thinking mind level of stuff, but towards the spiritual, which I often do in the channel, you could say that as long as we are taking the counter posture against society, that we are still looking to define ourselves and find identity in that. And in that attempt to find identity, we are once again locking ourselves in and preventing, or rather preserving, the egoic mind as our main identity, as opposed to allowing ourselves to grow and become something completely free altogether, free of the egoic mind as our main identity. So it doesn't matter how rebellious you become, it's still a position. And positionality, as David Hawkins would say, is the very trap that we are trying to liberate ourselves from. Now, it could be, as very often is the case, that you need to go from being a goody two-shoes to a rebel, to then go back to going, well, you know, the full rebel stance, there's prices to pay here that I think are just like silly. It's not worth it. And then you go back a little bit to this and you ping back and forth. And hopefully that pinging is not static, but it's a pinging that goes upwards to ever higher levels of understanding of how and when to use societal rules and mores, when to avoid them, and in that process synthesize something that is truly unique and authentic about yourself. You could argue that the spiritual process is a process of accelerating that pinging. It's an accelerated maturation process, almost like an incubator, in which the pinging happens systematically and with methods that make you go through the friction of that pinging on a daily basis, as well as you can, in as educated a way as you can, so that you can develop that higher understanding faster and more effectively, as opposed to having to wait for life to teach you lessons and then, you know, go through the whole thing. Some things can be done via the spiritual vehicle. Some things are so ingrained that only life may be able to shake you out of them. And in some cases, some things will never shake off. Maybe we'll go to our graves with a ton of unresolved stuff still. And yet, engaging in the process actively is very fulfilling. It brings vistas of life that are unimaginable, because whenever a synthesis happens, an insight takes place and our mind opens to essentially a new reality that we couldn't see before when we were either for or against. And part of the reason that I wanted to make this video is because I've seen, especially in the YouTube sphere, but also online and in conversations that I hear around me, this idea that by finding the counter argument or being a contrarian, you are somehow all free of it. You know, if you're an anti-vaxxer, that means that you disconnected yourself from the matrix of society. I even see people making videos about like, disconnect yourself from the matrix, you know, don't accept what society is telling you. Well, that's not it. You haven't disconnected yourself from a goddamn thing, because the one whose criteria is still being used to make up their minds is your egoic mind anyway. So you're just taking the counter argument as your new position. That's not disconnecting. That's simply flipping and flopping between two sides of the same coin. The coin being identity, positionality, and the egoic mind as your main way of carrying yourself around, as the lens through which you see reality and out of which you want to grow. So that if you want to grow out of the egoic mind, if you want to liberate your mind, want to liberate yourself from the egoic identity, you have to be comfortable with not taking any position at all, as opposed to being the rebellious, I go against the grain type, the contrarian or the clever comeback or the clever counter argument. I sometimes see them in the channel. I like everything I see. I just give everybody a like, because actually all their counter arguments are valid. Every single thing I say can be counter argued. All of them. There's not a single thing that I say that you cannot say yes, but. And so kudos for finding that. Just realize that now your job is not to stay as the counter arguer. Your job is to take my point and yours and to synthesize them in a dialectical way into something new, into something that makes us both grow. And so that's why I love the counter arguments. They rub my ego the wrong way, and I go like, I don't agree with that point, and I go like, counter argument, it's valid, it's true, it's valid on some way, acknowledge it. And I go like, yeah, actually it is valid on some way. Okay, very good. Now let's try to reconcile the two, because otherwise nothing has been gained. And I gain from this and from your comments as much as you guys hopefully gain from these videos. And on that note, I would love to invite you to comment on this one, whether it's a counter argument or an agreement, it's fine. And if you think that these are topics that people can benefit from, then your liking, your sharing, and subscribing, of course, always makes the YouTube channel more visible to people out there, and is very motivating to me. So I'll be back with more videos pretty soon. Until then, cheerio. Bye-bye.